Right, good evening everybody. Good evening and warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Community Scrutiny Group. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking because of the system and the cameras. Just to let everybody know, we're joined by 4 officers this evening. Got Darryl Birch, Service Manager Neighbourhoods, Derek Hayden, Community Development Manager, Ed Leddy Owen, Team Manager for Environment, and Paul Phillips, Environmental Sustainability Officer. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Barney and Councillor Butler is substituting.
Thank you very much and welcome Councillor Butler. Right, item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any from councillors at all? No, nothing at all. Righto. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January this year. Is everybody happy for me to sign those? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Right, on to our first substantive item on tonight's agenda, the Nottinghamshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, and I hand over to Paul.
Thank you. You should have all received the report of the Nottinghamshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. I will shortly give a presentation which will summarise what's in that report. But just before we go on to that, if I can just draw your attention to the recommendations in the report, which is section 2 of the report, which recommends that the Community Scrutiny Group A, support the draft Local Nature Recovery Strategy and support Nottinghamshire County Council going out to public consultation on the draft Local Nature Recovery Strategy. B, make recommendations for any additions or alterations that they consider should be made to the draft Local Nature Recovery Strategy if required. And C, support the Council responding to the supporting authorities consultation by Nottinghamshire County Council with the decisions given at 2A and 2B. Okay, thank you. So the Local Nature Recovery Strategy has come about from the Environment Act 2021. This requires 46 local nature recovery strategies across the country, of which Nottinghamshire is one of them. Nottinghamshire County Council has been designated as a responsible body with the requirement to drive forward the production of their local nature recovery strategy. Rushcliffe Borough Council is designated as a supporting authority. That means we are a consultee for the production of the strategy, and once published, we must consider the strategy in the production of our own policies and strategies. I've got a short video to show you produced by the County Council. Okay. Always worry when you use technology whether it'll actually work, but it has worked. So sorry about the low volume, but it was coming out of the computer rather than over the system.
We will distribute.
But the link to it is on YouTube, and the link was in the slides, which will also be distributed to you. So, what is a local nature recovery strategy? It's a new system of spatial strategies, i.e. map-based, across the county, showing where nature can be found. It's locally led, transparent and collaborative. There's a set process that has to be followed, which has been set out by government, and it maps the most valuable existing nature across the county, agrees the priorities for the recovery of nature going forwards, and maps, if I can put my teeth back in, specific proposals for creating or improving habitat for nature and wider environmental benefits. The process was set out, sorry, it's a bit small this, but it was set out by government. Basically, the first step is mapping the areas that are already of importance. Then the next stage is to describe the area of the county and what opportunities there are for recovery. Then it's agreeing the priorities of those opportunities and what potential measures, what can actually be carried out across the county, and then mapping where those measures may be carried out. That produces a written report, which you've had part of. There are some more appendices which haven't been distributed at this point, but I thought there was plenty of reading in what you did receive already. And a map which will be online. It's not yet available publicly, but I have a capture of it, which I'll show you on a slide shortly. And they together, the map and the written document is the local nature recovery strategy. This will be reviewed, and we'll look at that, mention about that again shortly. And in future reports would also include what had been achieved since the previous report. So the governance was set out by the county council. As I said, the county council is responsible for producing the local nature recovery strategy, and they are supporting authorities which are set out in legislation, and they are the district and borough councils, of which, as you know, there are 7. In addition, the East Midlands Combined County Authority is a supporting authority, and Natural England is a supporting authority. A governance setup was created, which has a political oversight group, which is the Nottinghamshire and Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Economic Prosperity Committee, of which the leader of the council attends that. There was a working group which I have attended on behalf of all of the districts and boroughs in the county. There was a public consultation group set up to lead public consultation across the county. And then there was working groups working on specific issues. So there was a mapping group and there was a planners group, of which planners from this authority also attended. There was also a farmers and landowners group, and there was also a group that was looking at species specifically. So there was the specialists in your invertebrates and your birds and your flowers and all of those different groups. The specialists attended and they determined what was important in the county from the species terms. Okay. There has been consultation undertaken in the preparation of this strategy, and there's been engagement with statutory bodies, the Environment Agency, Natural England, Forestry Commission. There's been, as I mentioned, species experts, conservation organisations, so the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB, those kind of organisations have all been consulted. Planners and developers in public and private sector, landowners. Consultation was done with parish councils. There has been public events, so at the county show and at in the shopping centre in Nottingham, and there has also been an online survey which other people have been able to make their comments on. So this has developed priorities and measures. The priorities are those things that we want to achieve across the county as a county collectively. So it's relevant to the Nottinghamshire habitats and species. It's looked at specifically what we've got, and it reflects our local circumstances, including what's most important to those people in the who've responded in the consultation. The measures are the specific actions to achieve the priorities. So we will look to enhance the existing habitats and create new habitats in the county. It's been a requirement that these are actually practical, realistic and deliverable. So all the time, we might want to have some things, but if they're not practical, then there's no point trying to pursue it. So we are looking at what can actually be delivered. And there is the opportunity of not just biodiversity and nature improvements, but it has wider environmental benefits. For instance, natural flood management, carbon sequestration, improving public access to green spaces. So there's lots of other other benefits that this hopefully will provide as well. A number of people, specialists, groups, organisations were brought together once the list of potential of priorities had been identified, to identify what potential measures could be carried out to deliver those priorities. There's a couple of photos there of some of the groups working on basically big maps and drawing on them where we thought you could actually deliver some of these measures. Not all of them can be mapped. Some apply over basically the whole county. So you can't obviously map the whole county, it would be pointless. The measures though are based on where there's already something important, and then following 4 Lawton principles, which were principles developed by advisors to the government in 2010, which basically says that we should have more nature, that they should be bigger areas, in better condition and more joined up. So more, bigger, better and joined. And we mapped specific areas that could become important for biodiversity. So where there's lots of measures all going in, those areas become important areas because they could deliver in the future. This isn't to say that they will all be delivered, but it's identifying where they could be delivered. Around some of these areas, buffer zones were used. So along watercourses, they've been mapped with basically a buffer along each main watercourse to show that they are important, and around woodland areas as well. And the best locations for nature recovery and biodiversity together will provide the environmental benefits. So, sorry, it's only small, it's just a capture from the screen, but this is what the map's going to look like, focusing in on Rushcliffe. So we've got mapped areas of woodland, wetlands and watercourses, across the county, heathlands, but we have no heathland in Rushcliffe. It's not got the right geology, the right soil type to have heathland. Grasslands, farmlands, urban and post-industrial areas, and then species. And so the areas that are in colour on that map demonstrate the areas either that are already important or where there is potential to provide these measures that I was talking about before. Basically, the blue ones are water, the green ones are woodland, the pink ones are the farmland, the black are some that covers multiple different opportunities. And so you've got Rushcliffe there from the top of the map right the way down to the bottom of the map, and you've got the River Trent forming a corridor along the northern edge of Rushcliffe there. So that is the map that is being proposed, and you'll be able to see that when it is publicly consulted on in the near future. So what are the next steps? The next steps, well, we currently are being consulted up to the 13th of April as a supporting authority. All the supporting authorities are given a 28-day consultation prior to going out to public consultation. Providing no supporting authority says that it is not fit for purpose, the plan is on the 6th of May for public consultation to start. 6th of May because of the county elections, so obviously they can't publicly consult on it during the county election period. That will close, the public consultation will then close on the 16th of June, and just at some point within the summer, once they've taken into account all of the responses they've received so far, there will be another 28-day consultation with us and the other supporting authorities. And also they will notify the Secretary of State for the Environment that they're preparing to publish their local nature recovery strategy. At some point, probably August, September or October, that kind of time, the aim is that it will be adopted by the county council and published. And once it's published, it becomes a statutory document, which, as I said previously, as a council, we will have to consider in everything we do. So what we're doing should complement or support what is in the published document. Then it is up to DEFRA, but it can be reviewed. The legislation requires it to be reviewed at some time between 3 and 10 years after publication. And DEFRA will make that decision as to when they want it reviewing. There are some web pages that have been put up by the county council, which explain about the local nature recovery strategy. You can also see the consultation documents, and there is an email address at the county council for the local nature recovery strategy. That is a summary of what's in there. Do you have any questions?
It's not a question, Chair, but there seems to be an awful lot of work to be done. It seems a very ambitious document. How much of it, at a rough guess, do you think is achievable? There was a lot more that has been suggested, that has already been taken out as not achievable. Yes, it is meant to be ambitious. It's not meant to be easy. As to how much can be delivered, that partly is down to funding. And at this point in time, we don't know what funding will be attached to these local nature recovery strategies. We know that some funding will come in that it will support biodiversity net gain in developments, because if they're developing biodiversity net gain in areas that are highlighted as important, they get extra points. But they'll also, but we don't know yet how they're going to be applying to the farming grants, how they might be to any other form of grant aid that comes out of government, or from other organisations. So there's still a lot of questions, and a lot of it will depend on where that funding comes from.
It's on the funding thing again, because I'm just looking at paragraph 9.2, and obviously the recovery strategy itself, as you say, does not provide funding. But the measures require landowners in areas identified to agree to the measures being implemented. So it's up to the landowners, if that's part of their land as part of the strategy, to find the funding. No.
Basically, they have to agree to it. It's their land.
Yes, they've got to agree.
So if they don't want it to happen on their land, they can say, no, we don't want it to happen. And one of the things in the public consultation is they are expecting that that some landowners might come back and say, no, take that off the map. We don't want our area in there. The delivery of it in funding terms might be, I mean, if they are a farmer, they might get farming grants that will be aimed at supporting the delivery of the local nature recovery strategy.
So that's why we haven't got the map, because obviously with the consultation things would
it will change. Yes, the map will change. That's why it's not been put out to public consultation. It does require the landowner to agree to it, but largely there may be some landowners who have specific reasons why they don't want it in, but it doesn't mean that that they're going to be forced to do anything if it is in there. But it may give them the opportunity to take advantage of anything that comes forward, which might be a county council scheme. It might be that the county council will have a funding pot that will fund some of these schemes. It might be that Natural England will have a funding pot that will fund some of these schemes. Might be the Environment Agency as well will target their funding to something that is in the local nature recovery strategy. So it's the idea is to focus the attention, I suppose, of all of these different organisations that all have different funding pots, so that we're all working for the same purpose and perhaps not as scattergun as it has been in the past.
So thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think it's great. I think it's really, really good. I'm really, really pleased to see this. I hope it sort of gets a good take up. I hope the landowners are happy with it as well, and then they're encouraged to do that. There are, I know, all kinds of little bits and pieces of land all over the county where this kind of initiatives could be really, really useful. There's lots could be done. There are, with the housing developments that have been made around the county, there are sometimes stranded trees, stranded bits of land that could be linked up. And I'm very pleased to see that, about the idea of linking areas up and making them bigger, because one of the biggest problems with habitat loss for animals and plants to a lesser extent, but animals certainly, is the fact that we keep chopping up their habitat into either smaller and smaller and smaller bits. It doesn't help when developers put loads of fences absolutely everywhere, and it's like just planking a big giant mesh down as far as wildlife is concerned, and breaking up those areas. I didn't wonder, is this something that, again, where sort of landowners sort of decide to say, actually, there's this biodiversity net gain happening from a development over there. I could use some of my land here and include it in the map to be part of that. Is that right?
Yes, there is if a developer can't provide all the biodiversity net gain that they have to provide on their own development site, they can buy units of biodiversity from someone else. And so one of these landowners, if they choose to, there are legal loopholes, obviously, that they have to go through, contracts to be signed, all of that kind of thing. But they can sell the biodiversity units to offset the loss from the development site. It's sometimes called land banking, and it's something which we would encourage landowners to provide land banks. And again, if they are in one of these areas that can provide the best opportunities, that gives more points to the developer in their development. So that if they're not in a high priority area, they have to provide more biodiversity net gain, basically.
And so there's other things, loads of other things in the report. Part of it reminded me, there's all the bit about the sandstone areas of the county, reminded me of a very, very enthusiastic supply teacher we had at school who used to rave about bunter sandstone all the time. And there's a bit in there, well, there's quite a bit in there about conifer plantations that were put in to generate some supplies of wood. Now, we don't have that in Rushcliffe. That's not a thing that's happened here, but we do hear a lot about the reduced tree cover and how we don't have an awful lot. And is there an opportunity with this to get even more tree cover back within Nottinghamshire that's not just those coniferous ones, because there was issues with acidification of soil and things like that, I seem to recall in the past as well?
The simple answer is yes. The longer answer is, of course, some conifer plantations do have value in themselves. You must remember that there are some species associated with conifer plantations. So it's not always the baddie that it's sometimes portrayed to be. But there is opportunity, and there are plans, there are measures within here to increase biodiverse broadleaf cover in the county. There are plans to revert conifer plantations on, for instance, sites that previously had ancient woodland, known as pause sites. They can be restored. So it does target those kind of things within the strategy, yes.
Okay, and there's like this bit in there about sort of the buffer zone either side of watercourses as well, which I was really pleased to see, because one of the things I really like to see is extension of that, so that we can sort of, and it does mention putting the meanders back into some of these streams and rivers as well, so that they actually have more time to absorb rain, so we get less flooding as well. So I'd be really pleased to see if we can get more of that done. And I know that we used to have we now have the one drainage board, don't we? One member drainage board, but it used to be that we had loads of drainage boards with lots of different councillors on all the different little drainage boards around Rushcliffe. So I'm hoping that that knowledge is still there with some of the councillors and with officers and with the people locally, so that we can sort of reclaim some of that watercourse as well.
Yes, I mean, the drainage board has been consulted on this as well, so they've had input to it. The Environment Agency obviously is a statutory consultee, so they've had input to that. And it was actually the Environment Agency and myself who pushed for that particular part to be put into the strategy, because it is important to reconnect the floodplain with the river, and where the river's been very canalised, to try and reclaim that more natural approach and allow the water to have somewhere to go, so it doesn't cause the flooding in the areas we don't want it flooding. So it has, the value for water control, and of course is also important for biodiversity and ecology.
Yeah, I won't go on all that. But I was just a couple of things. Just to extend the watercourse one, I'd be very pleased to see work done along the Grantham Canal as well, to help get more of that in water permanently. I mean, I know there's work being done, for instance, at the golf course at the moment. But the other thing is to just get that biodiversity and sort of reintroduce or help grow the populations of some of the animals that we have in the area. And personally, I would love to see a lot more done to introduce animals that used to be in this country that we've lost, even ones that have sort of people have got really nervous about and don't think of as actually native to this country, but they are and they should be.
And the restoration of species is also included within this strategy.
I just wanted to just on like all the different groups and that have kind of been consulted and spoken to. Have the Crown Estate been spoken to about it, because they've got quite a lot of land and that, and maybe their strategies are.
The Crown Estate has been approached. but hasn't responded so far. They will be. One of the issues has actually been is that some of the landowners have been saying, well, until we've got something to look at, we don't know how to respond. So there hasn't been a big response so far from it. I think once that map becomes public and is being consulted on, then they'll get more response from them. So Crown Estate hasn't yet responded to it. Hopefully they will do in the public consultation that's coming forward, but they have been approached.
And forget with the map, I take it that people are kind of able to put forward suggestions that might have been missed from there in their local area that they might think of, and that, because I was looking at a link that the councillors were given to of an interactive map within the strategy, and there was a few areas where it was like, how did that get picked up and kind of local knowledge around it, but then there was like 1 or 2 sites as well that was, oh, that's not on there, and that potentially could be looked at as a potential site.
Yes, it is the intention. Exactly how the county is going to host it, I'm not entirely certain. I've not seen that yet, but the intention is that they will be able to. You will be able to put forward sites that maybe have been missed. Yes.
Where you said about the reviews every 3 to 10 years, what review is that? Is it of this kind of this document, or is it how the sites are doing and how often are those kind of looked at? Is that kind of a continuous kind of process?
Both. The whole document will have to be reviewed. I mean, it won't obviously have to be. You're not starting from scratch. You're reviewing the document rather than writing it from scratch. So it should be a lot quicker and easier process. But yes, the idea is that there will have to be reports done in each of those periods of what's been achieved, and then what's going to go forward for the future.
You asked my question, Chair. It was basically going to say what Chair's already said about sort of new sites, because obviously if landowners say, I don't want this piece of land included, there may be something suitable elsewhere that hasn't been picked up. And I was going to ask the mechanism about how that's going to happen, but when you get to, I presume that's in the 6-week consultation, not the 28 days at the moment.
Yes, the public consultation will be much wider ranging, and it will be open to everyone, and it will show the maps, and it will give opportunity to put forward proposals. However, I mean, all the proposals that will be put forward will still have to be assessed as to whether they're deliverable. So there may be that, because we've already had proposals put that have been deemed as not deliverable, or they're not a priority. So the species and habitats that are important have been prioritised, and if it's not one of those species, it's not on the map. And so that will happen again. They will be checked to make sure that they meet the priority habitats and species that are that have already been confirmed.
Just to follow up on the consultation process, when we get to that beginning of, or before we get to the beginning of that 6-week consultation, just how big are you going to make this? Because this is huge, and I think it's something that as much public buy-in as we can get is important. I mean, I'm expecting it to see on local news, on everything you can do, even on billboards if we can afford it.
Exactly how it is going to be done is up to the county council to decide. I haven't seen the detail of how they're going to do it, but they have been talking about radio and TV. You know, they have been talking about that kind of thing. Exactly how they're going to do it is up to them to determine.
And that's just the county council leading that, the supporting authority. We don't get a kind of push from here.
We don't. We can make recommendations, but at the end of the day, the county is the responsible authority. So they're the decision maker, the final decision maker, and the money part. Yeah.
But in terms of when the consultation happens, we will be pushing out and signposting that through our normal communication channels as much as possible to ensure as many people as possible engage within that process. So we will do that as a part of that, as one of the 17 authorities that is promoting this activity.
Feeding it out to the parishes. and-
Yes.
No. Yeah, Councillor.
So one of the things I was looking at was for mention of schools on this, and there's a bit about natural history GCSE, and I know that I was at an event. I was on the stall next to these folks not long ago in an event in Broxton. So I was wondering, is there an opportunity to sort of take that stall or something, or do this educational pieces in the schools?
One of the issues is that there isn't a lot of resource available to do lots and lots of events. There is one officer at the county council who's dealing with the local nature recovery strategy, and her role currently ends in August. So there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to go into schools through the county council.
Or is it something just to sort of feedback as part of our sort of recommendations that that issue came up, and has the county council, or is the county council thinking of that, and can you make any suggestions? Because this whole idea of this consultation, well, one of the ideas of this consultation, isn't it, to feedback our thoughts? So just suggested to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with that. Something we should feedback. Concerned that there's this lack of funding. The person's not going to be there for much longer, and we think they should be.
Yeah, definitely, because it can go under the recommendations and that, and put forward. So yeah, I think we can put that request through, and as you say, we've kind of consulted with schools and that type of thing of how that would look, and go out there and at the event, because I think in that period is the county show again as well, that will hopefully get a big footfall of people. So hopefully they're standing there this year. So they were. So yeah, that'd be good for them to attend. So if we haven't got any more questions or comments and feedback,
Just
go ahead.
in terms of the post that you said would finish in August, the county council post, I realised, is that to be refilled, or is that? I'm not putting you on the spot here. It's just it seems a bit of a shame if they're not going to have an officer to actually oversee this.
Obviously, there's a limit to what I can say because it is a county council post. It isn't a Rushcliffe Borough Council post. The current officer was funded by the central government as new burdens funding, and the new burdens funding will have been run out. There has been mention that there might be further new burdens funding coming forward, but it hasn't yet been confirmed by government. So the county council are very much, looking to see where the funding would come from for such a post.
Yeah, I think Paul's mentioned, we just need to remember it's ultimately a county council document that we're looking to support and feed into. I think what I'm hearing, and just discussing, Paul sits on a number of different working groups, don't you, Paul? And I think what Paul will quite happily do is feedback that we have had the scrutiny on this, and we've got some concerns about potential levels of resourcing. Someone mentioned, it's a very ambitious document, so we're quite happy to feedback our members' views that there are concerns over resourcing, and also how we communicate it as well, and how it's advertised. So I think we're quite happy to take that back and do that.
Yeah, so kind of that being an action from, just to find out what those kind of points are, just to seek clarification from the county council on those areas. Unless there's anything else, I'll go to the recommendations. So the first is to support draft LNRS and support Nottinghamshire County Council going out to public consultation on the local Nottinghamshire recovery strategy. So if we're all in support of this document and that going forward, a show of hands. Thank you very much. B, to make recommendations for any additions or alterations that may consider should be made to the draft of the LNRS, and I think we've met that requirement. So also, if we can just have a show of hands that we all agree that we've done that. Thank you very much. And C, support the council responding to the supporting authorities consultation by Nottinghamshire County Council with decisions given at 2A and 2B. So I think we've met that, so we can just have a show of hands to confirm we're happy with that. Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you very much, Paul, for that. Right, going on to our next item on tonight's agenda is the Carbon Management Action Plan review, and I'll pass over to Derek.
Thank you. So you'll have received a cover report which sets out the background and the principles of the document. The key recommendations at item 2 are consider the progress to date for the adoption of the carbon management plan, and B is contribute towards the emerging carbon management action priorities for 25-26. Just to recap, there are 3 areas of focus that we concentrate on in our carbon reduction plan is all our direct emissions, so the Borough Council produce to deliver our services, which is scope 1, indirect emissions, such as electricity purchased from other organisations, and emissions created by the production of energy for the organisation, and then indirect emission, so supply chain, how if we buy a product, how the life cycle that that's had. The Borough Council has 8 key priority teams which we manage our carbon reduction and our journey to net carbon neutral by 2030 from our own operations. They're spread across 8 broad teams, which are property assets, fleets and transport, contracts and procurement, policy and regulation, waste recycling, operational activities, community business, and offsetting. What we mean by offsetting is the planting of trees or growth in grassland to provide carbon sequestration for the carbon that we can't get out, because we will never, it is broadly recognised that we will produce carbon beyond 2030, so we will need to have to offset that because we won't be at carbon neutral zero. We set out in a series of tables through the report in terms of the production of what we will do. And what I'll attempt to do, we'll cover this in the substantive presentation, which Ed will lead on because he is the lead officer in this work. But to bring it to life, in Appendix A, I provided you with the dashboard of the action plan. But to make it more meaningful, I thought I would take this opportunity this year to share just a snapshot very, very quickly of the internal document that the team use to track this. So this is an MS Teams spreadsheet which we use, and this dashboard which I share with you pretty much highlights by theme each of the activities across those broad 8 teams. So if you go to the 3rd tab, Ed, so Ed on an annual basis crunches a huge amount of data, which is basically calculation of the carbon we produce from our operations. Sorry, it's all right. Just go backward.
It's gone down to the millions. So it's not that intensive. I'll show you. There we go.
Yeah. So that is tracking by year the carbons we produce from our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, which gives us our total carbon we produce. But just to reassure you that Ed, we lock him in a room for about a week and he intensively goes through, so he's getting all the carbon in terms of how much our leisure centres consume, how much our gas and electricity bills are, how much our fleet and transport produces across the authority, and trying to get that information goes into that spreadsheet. If you just go on to the next tab, if that's okay. So that's just a snapshot of the data that we produce. So this is, if you just go to the end and go to the top of, because it might show that, no, as in like just go up up in that tab, because it'll just go and then just go across to the corner, because it's not, I appreciate that it's not very easy to read. But this is the property assets. So it basically, we have department leads. So we have a quarterly meeting for our carbon reduction group, but a lot of the activity happens outside of those meetings. A lot of the activities that we're doing are captured within our service management plan and form part of our corporate strategy and our key strategic tasks. So what we've identified is what the action is, who's the lead specialist for the area, what the priority action is, its time scale for delivery. So just to articulate that, short time scale is between 1 to 2 years, medium term scale is between 2 to 5 years, long time scale 5 to 10 years of the strategy. The estimated cost, and when you start an action, it goes in, you don't really have a clear idea of what that cost will be until you've done a proper analysis to get cost certainty. So we try and estimate cost. Then we have the status, whether it's not started, or completed. And then we have the current. So Ed is currently working with all of the teams across all of these 47 live actions in a constant back and forth with the individual officers in charge for what the latest status of their project. On a quarterly basis, we discuss those. So if you just want to just tab across a couple, just for information, pick anyone, yeah. So you can see in terms of property and assets, what the department's in charge of it, how we think we're going to do it and how we deliver it. And some of these actions are large corporate priority actions. So if there is an area or an interest or a property or a thing that you've got, is it captured within the carbon? As members, in terms of scrutiny, as you can do at any time, if you've got a specific question about a specific area, does it feature in the carbon management plan? Has it been captured? What's the status of that action? We can quite quickly provide you an answer for that. And then, has it been costed? What does that cost looks like? Is it a short term? Is it an immediate term, medium term, or a long term project? And how are you going to fund it? So that will hopefully take us on our journey to 2030. And by then crunching all that data and all of the actions, you can see on the dashboard, which is in the Appendix 1, the line which shows where we should be by our road to carbon neutrality by 2030. So I just wanted to show you that. Now, what Ed is going to do is he's going to go through the substantive presentation of some of the actions and what we've delivered in the current year and what some of our priorities are for the next year. I will just caveat the fact that a lot of these projects we talked about before, because these are big, dirty industrial projects, which are multi-year project, and to decarbonise anything happens over a longer period of time as well. So some of the stuff we'll have covered before and some of them will be emerging. Ed.
Thank you, Derek. And yep, apologies, the microphone is now on. That's my first mistake. So what I'm going to go through is the charts, give a bit of details to them because everybody loves a load of graphs at about 10 to 8 in the evening. So what we're going to start off with is the mighty scopes 1, 2 and 3. So scope 1 is stuff that we are directly in control of. So if we've got bin lorries that are burning diesel, that's a scope 1. Gas that's being burnt in the properties that we directly occupy, that's all scope 1. Scope 2 is the electricity side of things. Now, we are sat on the fence with this one because we have a REGO tariff, that's Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin. But for the sake of good play and keeping a good house in order, I will produce 2 sets of figures to include the national greenhouse gas conversion factors in that. I'll go into that later, but I don't want to bore you to death with it. Scope 3 is the indirect things that we are our actions, our operations, our staff coming to and from home, and things we buy all fall within Scope 3. So, for example, our leisure centres are being managed by Parkwood. That's Scope 3, but it doesn't mean we have no control over it. We can make decisions on how we buy things, where we buy them, and that kind of thing to really lower down the impact that has. This Scope 3 is moving very much in the future as well, and there's a lot of innovative stuff going on. Nottingham University is very much involved in Scope 3 mapping as well. Again, this is, because we're split into two realms here, 2030 Rushcliffe Borough Council as a business, Rushcliffe Borough 2050. That's what this is illustrating. So a megaton is 1 million tonnes, and we've dropped from 2005 by approximately just over 200 megatons. Rushcliffe Borough Council has emitted 1,107 tonnes under Scope 1. So, you know, that kind of brings it into perspective. This is a big journey that we're on, and we'll touch on how we're assisting with the stuff that is what would seem completely out of our control, but it's not. So this is, again, this is a close-up of the graphs that Derek was talking about in the report earlier. So we've gone down this year by about 115 tonnes, and that's through the commissioning of systems. We've got obviously Bingham's all up and running now. We've got the everything getting sorted out with Streetwise and that kind of stuff, which caused a spike in the past. And then we've obviously got other efficiencies. Now, what this does not include, and I cannot wait for this time next year, is the implementation of the hydrogenated vegetable oil that all of the bin lorries and the large Streetwise vehicles are using. That's going to absolutely plummet. So this is Scope 3. This is incorporating what we are doing in terms of working with Parkwood, the major public sector decarbonisation projects and how they're going to have a big impact on this. We're looking at a further 300 tonnes at Copgrave. But again, just through better control, better understanding and better management, these have dropped down by, they've gone down by 385 tonnes. So that, just through better practice over, because bearing in mind these figures are lagged a year, which again is very frustrating for me because it doesn't include the HVO, this doesn't include Copgrave, and even the crematorium has become more efficient over the last year. So 385 tonnes has been saved on that. That is a Copgrave and a bit taken off the grid through the Scope 3 emissions. The graphs here, these are our own in-house emissions, and the graph on the right is including an accepted offset, which is done through the annually released greenhouse gas conversion factors, which is, as Derek was saying, when I get locked in that room, I get locked in that room with that spreadsheet. I'm not allowed out till I've done it. You can see a big drop, obviously, 3/4 of the way along the graph. That is because of COVID. You know, it's really easy to save energy when you just stop using leisure centres. It absolutely plummets and then it spikes again. 22-23, it spiked again because, again, you had Streetwise being brought in, you had Bingham Arena being commissioned, and obviously the crematorium as well. But again, that's all plateauing out nicely. So here is the all of those tabs that every quarter we all meet and discuss. This is where we are in terms of the projects that are in progress. Incorporated in that is, again, Copgrave is very much coming to a finish. It will hopefully in 2 weeks' time be done. We've got Julian Khan and we've got Gamston Community Centre amongst other projects that are going on. We're looking at Hound Lodge as well, making that far more carbon efficient, but not impacting on the vital service that it provides. And then again, we've got 29 actions that have been completed. So when Derek was going through earlier, the ones that were in green, that's one of the 29 there. So again, looking at the highlights, we've got obviously the decarbonisation of Copgrave. That is the air source heat pump, which is a giant, well, it's not, it's a shipping container. It's called an eco pod. All of the compressor units and all of the controls are in there. That was craned into the pad that you can just see there on the right hand side of the back of the leisure centre. Within that, where when that gets plumbed in, it now has an evaporator deck. I've got a photo of it later on, which basically what you've got in there is a giant fridge working in reverse that's taking heat from the air. And because Cotgrave has what's referred to in the industry as a large thermal store, which has low-grade heat, it's called a swimming pool. It's fantastic. So what that's enabled Leisure Energy, the contractor, to do is design a scheme that can be plumbed in, and then you have a heat exchanger put in that allows the existing dry side central heating to behave as normal. So that in its own right is quite innovative. On a smaller scale, but equally important, we are working through SALIC's PSDS, Public Sector Decarbonisation 3C, and what that's doing is part funding the decarbonisation of a full retrofit, as it's called in the industry, where we're going to insulate and then net zero heat Julian Khan. And then also on that, because Gampston Community Hall has had its cavity wall insulation done, we can then just do a supply and fit for fitting an air to water heat pump there as well. So Julian Khan has come back from tender, has just been awarded subject to contract, and Gampston is currently out to tender as of Monday. Very exciting stuff. Obviously, Daryl's team have been chugging around now in HVO for getting on a year now, isn't it? So that's going to be an anvil drop. That's looking at around about 700 to 800 tons of carbon dioxide gone, which is going to be very, very good for the charts. We've also as well got the electric vans. We'll come on to that a bit more later. And then again, the stuff that Paul's doing, we are taking the offsetting side as ramped up a gear. So we'll come on to that later as well. In terms of working with residents, parish councils, getting the local community involved and that kind of thing, we're continuing to work very closely with the Midlands Net Zero Hub to pull in the funding and spend that funding where it's needed for the people that need it the most. Still continuing to work with parish councils to go out there and do energy audits, give them an impartial audit on any given assets they have. Cricket pavilions, always a good laugh. We've got the various old, well, a couple of them are old schools that have become parish halls and that kind of thing. And then there was another which was absolutely brand new and should be championed because some people have taken the initiative and gone out there. So it's working with Arcan and people like that just to make sure that there is that access to the impartial advice that's needed. Same rules apply for businesses and that kind of thing. We'll go out, we'll tell them what they need to hear and where they can go for funding and that kind of stuff. Working on, in the long run, again, regional collaborative bulk buying scheme through solar providers. So you've got the big solar co-op, you've got solar for schools. They're very much involved in what's called the Fast Followers project, and we'll come on to that in a bit as well. And it's about linking everybody up because we can't all completely rely on grant funding. There's got to be initiatives out there and ethical financing to get panels on the roofs. So again, property asset side of things, we are practically completed on the Cotgrave swimming pool. It's just I'm becoming a major pain to our delivery partner, Leisure Energy, phoning them up saying, can I please have every single certificate I need to send off so we can get that all sorted? And then, as I've already said, the small projects are underway with the 3C. There is a very exciting land acquisition that's currently underway. We are eyeballing sites, and Nick Berry and his team are working in the background to see if we can procure those so that Paul can then literally get his hands dirty in terms of getting trees planted and that kind of thing. And then in terms of our own stock, and it's going back on the theme of we can't rely on grant funding forever, is exploring models, initiatives, funding streams that can be matched with financing schemes to get our buildings to net zero. Because one thing that has been noticed is that 100% funded schemes are becoming less and less and less, and Salix is included on that. So it's just about getting more strings to the bow. Paul, Sandy have been extremely busy as well, getting trees planted on existing council land and green spaces. And then we're looking at about 500, isn't it?
500.
Yeah, yeah. So again, that's a few tons that we can tick off there. You've already seen this. We've got the overhaul of the carbon management plan, which is far more streamlined and gives us a really good base to A, hold people against, and B, really record that down so that I can then crunch loads of numbers and say we've saved a few tons here and there. And another thing, as I said earlier, Hound Lodge is being very much looked at to make that far more energy efficient, because at the moment it is a solid wall property with very high ceilings and not a great deal of loft insulation. And it's future-proofing it so that when that's done, it has no impact on the core service it does, making sure there is that service for vulnerable families if needed, whilst getting it ready for long-term for the net zero journey. So fleet and transport, again, we've got EV points, electric vehicle points, have now been installed at Streetwise. There's 6 medium charge points that have gone in, 22 kilowatts, with the provision of a rapid charge point. We just have to wait 4 weeks now for it to be connected to the national grid, or the district network operator, as we call it. But it's all there, it's all good, and it's ready to go. We've obviously as well got the 2 Toyota vans. They are now running around the district doing the caretaker work, and also, is it the what?
With the waste team helping out, doing things like bin deliveries and stuff like that.
Yeah. So again, it's not only have you got the bin lorries driving around saying we're filled full of H3O waste oil, so there's 90% reduction there. Your bin's now getting delivered on the back of an electric vehicle, which is saying, hey, electric vehicles are useful, they are good, because they're not just, dare I say it, a bit of eco-bling. No, that's a working vehicle, and it'll be interesting to see how it's been, how useful it is, and how practical it is just doing the day-to-day stuff. I know, spoken to a couple of the caretakers here, they say it goes quite quickly because you've got no gears, you've got no I'll not use exact phraseology, but it is they can move. Yeah. So that again is giving that message to residents that we as the Borough Council are taking it very seriously. We've got the electric buggies as well. They are at the country park. They are doing a day-to-day operation. We are in the middle of a little issue with the product recall, but that's very much in hand and being dealt with. But we've had absolutely no issues with them since we've had them. Again, that's getting on towards 10 months to a year now. The only anecdotal complaint I've had from the park users is they are silent. And you'll turn around and there's a buggy. And it's just there. But in terms of its job, what it does and how it behaves with the old diesel buggies, no issues there whatsoever.
Yeah. But in a country park environment where you want to hear bird song in the morning, it also has its benefits because it's a very low impact, and our staff drive incredibly carefully and can alert people. So it's just a fantastic advantage for a country park, and it means that we want to be an exemplar site at the country park in terms of we've got an energy neutral education centre. We've got green buggies. We've got encourage people to walk and cycle. So what a fantastic example for a country park. And the Friends and Rangers have bought electric tools, so they're really on board and a part of that journey. And it's a really good example, which use as a kind of a testing bed for the rest of the authority in terms of our carbon journey. Sorry, Ed.
No, it's fantastic. And then as well, we've got a charge point installed at West Park. So again, there is the old myth that there's nowhere to charge with the EVs. That's Rushcliffe has a very good external network anyway, but what we're also doing, so we've obviously got them at the back of the building here at the arena, they're at the country park, they're at Copgrave. We've now got our own at the West Park, so they can trickle charge there overnight, as well as when it's commissioned, there will be multiple points at Streetwise as well. So contracts and procurement, this is getting very much embedded in how this is going and investigating the scope 3 stuff I alluded to earlier. So everything from, again, I'm going to pick on Daryl, where do you buy your bin lorries, how do you buy them, through to where do we source our pens, where does our paper come from? And when I was investigating potential softwares, legal practice and how that's implemented can have quite a significant impact on carbon. So going paperless and developing the business cases to implement this across the council in its general day-to-day administrative business function. Obviously, a very big thing that's coming up is the actual implementation. I mean, the biodiversity net gain has been out for over a year now, but we've been working hard in the background with IT and planning to get a system in place that Paul and Sandrina can use to start mapping out and setting up the biodiversity net gain that is by law now has to be implemented at within any application that's put within the borough. In the bottom right hand corner is how that system will look like. Obviously, yeah, you can't see much detail. What it's allowing them to do is then put on what is there, what isn't, what needs to be done. That can then be put on there because we've got to monitor it for 30 years. So it's building up that essential GIS data that could be pulled back in on for the foreseeable future. One thing we have been doing, we've done a lot of work with Michael Gallagher on this, who at the time was at the Midlands Net Zero Hub, but has now gone over to the East Midlands Combined Authority, is there's a thing called the Climate Crisis Scorecarding System, which has caused a bit of angst amongst fellow local authorities, both within D2N2 and nationally. And what we've actually done is set up a CDP methodology, which is an internationally recognised peer review system that will look at everything from the however the city of Seattle is managed in terms of its local governance, through to Rushcliffe, through to Penzance in Cornwall. And what all the local authorities have done across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire have got involved in this methodology so that we will have what we believe is a far more open, fair and proactively scrutinised system, so that we'll be able to look at that and go, we have this review that we can implement and feel we can demonstrate against our peers across the partnership zone. And again, as I've already alluded to as well, it's looking at scope 3 when the procurement systems are swapped over and our colleagues in finance have allowed their hair to grow back after the end of financial year review. It will be time to then look at how we can monitor everything from the staple we bought right the way up to it could be the area of land for carbon capture, how we can tangibly map that carbon so it means something. Policy and regulation. So the climate change strategy, yeah, again, that's all been overhauled and streamlined, so it gives us a really good benchmark to work from. Ecology team, Paul and Sandy have obviously been working very hard with Helen and her team in planning in order to get the all the biodiversity net gain both embedded, responded to, and as of well, I'd say next month we'll be looking at implementing that for every planning application that comes in. What's really good, we do occasionally work with environmental health, but the stuff with installing heat pumps and getting people looking at more sustainable modes of transport and things like that, there has been a review of the air quality strategy and areas have been downgraded within the borough. So that's really, really good. And in terms of the successes at the country park, I mean, Alistair, he's obviously now on paternity leave, but when he comes back, it's looking at how the successes there can be rolled out across the other sites, including any sequestration land if that comes into fruition, on how not only do we just go out and plant trees on it, but what can be done to improve and enhance all the green areas so that it can be enjoyed by the public. So, for example, areas of land, we don't just want to turn it into a forest and go, yeah, we've got our tonnage sorted, so that's great. It's no, can it be used for health, horse riding, sport, green gym, recreation, and things like that? And then again, all this kind of stuff has been really helpful in getting the full business and political leadership support moving this forward. One thing that's been going off, again, very much in the background, is proactively working with the East Midlands Combined Authority, and where there has been pots of money available, where we've been asked to consult in terms of how we can work together and make life as easy as possible for the authority, is just being there on hand to support with that delivery. So get away to recycling, Dale, please feel free to chip in where you see fit. Curbside recycling is going to commence hopefully by the end of this year. That's going to be the new 180 litre wheelie bins. They're going to be used on the 6 weekly cycles. So it's a case of there's plenty of room there, because I personally find that the recycling bin it is quite compressible, and certainly I find it very, very difficult to fill. I think mine's a 70 litre, it's a tiny one, but there's an option there that should hopefully be really successful in terms of there should be no issues with that time period. And again, the stringent rollout, it will be a big thing to do, but in terms of we've got the time to make sure that everything can be procured, delivered, the education's out there in terms of that, of how, what, where, and what you can do to make the most of that. But in order for the transition, it has agreed, and I've reluctantly agreed to this because fortunately it doesn't impact on any of the EV propositions. It's a case of the communal sites, so glass collection and stuff like that in the car parks will remain to help with the transition. So again, coming April in a couple of years, well, in a year's time, recycling legislation will be lapsed to allow more things to go into the blue bin, which will obviously be helpful. And again, that will help just alleviate and prevent cross-contamination and things like that. And then it's obviously working up and making sure the infrastructure will be in place by 2027 to start with the food collection. So how will that be managed? Where will it go? And will it be anaerobic digestion and stuff like that? So in terms of the operational activities, ecology, as well, need I say anything on top of what Paul's already said? It's the work that was reflected in his presentation is very much reflected in what's going off within Rushcliffe, and that's it. With where possible, the team is doing everything possible to consult, support, lead, get everything in there in terms of everything from water to natural grassland and that kind of stuff. In terms of IT, there are very good investigations been done into removal of printers, the old laser printers, which generate a lot of heat, and using cold printing, as it's called. And then within the actual just upstairs, there's been the removal of a lot of unnecessary servers. Servers are hungry beasts. If you don't have them, that's great. But the ones we do have are maintained and monitored so that they're kept as efficient in terms of heat and things like that. And I think the rest of the space has now been taken up with, I think it's all election stuff, which doesn't use a lot of energy, so that's absolutely fine. As I've already said, we are currently purchasing our electricity of a renewable energy guarantee of origin, which means, I suppose it is guilt-free electricity, but there is still losses in the system. But what it doesn't detract from is it's still very much worthwhile pursuing the photovoltaics for the sake of our own pocket. So if you're not pulling it in through the meter, generating it on site, then that's literally, as they say, quids in. Streetwise, already said this, we're just waiting for that to be hooked up to the national grid, and then we've got the 6 charge points there. And again, as you've already seen, the Carbon Clever branding is on the buggies, it's on the electric vans, and you've got the HVO all over on all the bin lorries. So that's always, I love seeing that. I was driving out of Streetwise a couple of days ago, and there's a bin lorry doing the recycling there with the HVO branding on it. Communities and business. So again, to help with the Devo, we've spent £580,000 running a retrofit scheme, primarily across East Leek, where there is a lot of hard to treat housing. That's made residents very, very happy in terms of the boiler switches off after half an hour rather than not switching off, which is always good. It means not burning gas anymore. There's been a lot of parish council engagement again through Rural Action Nottinghamshire events and things like that. And Rural Action Nottinghamshire events have been attending Fast Followers events and things. So it's reiterating the partnership working across the Nottinghamshire side and Derbyshire for that matter. Heating Upgrade Grant 2 is finishing. It's not been as successful as we'd like, but we've still got around about 30 properties that are off gas, fully insulated, and an air source heat pump fitted. And we work very closely with Miranda's team at the Nottingham Energy Partnership, who do a fantastic job educating residents on how to use these schemes. So it's very good just fitting a heat pump to someone and going, yeah, there you go, crack on. No, it's about understanding your radiators are cooler. The thing will carry on and rumble slowly in the background and that kind of thing, but your house will be lovely and warm. And again, what we've been doing with the Innovate UK, we've been doing a series of events across Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire. There's one coming up in the British Geological Survey, very high level planning at the moment, but that's due on the 12th of June. That's going to be a technology showcase in partnership with the British Geological Survey, because it's going to be here's renewable energy for your home. You can touch, taste, smell it, you can see it, and you can ask questions about industry expert, trade expert, and also the standards experts as well. So what the event is aiming to do is tell people everything they need to know to make an informed decision. And because there is an enormous ground source heat pump nearly finished at the British Geological Survey, they're going to take people for tours around that as well. Again, we're always keen to support local community energy groups. Bunny Energy Group is a one that I've been working with lately. They've hosted events that Nottingham Energy Partnership have done through through the Home Energy Advice Team. So what Bunny did is back in January, they hosted an event at the church, which was managed by Marsh's Energy Agency and Nottingham Energy Partnership, giving people the advice they need to make their hard to treat, listed or in a conservation area property net zero. Sarah Baker was there. She happily gave a talk on what you can do in your property in terms of from a conservation officer's advice within the planning side. So again, it's pulling people in and dispelling the myth that just because you live in an old property means no, you can't do anything. It's not how it works. So again, parish council energy audits, that's just a nice rumbling thing that gets me out and about in the district, which is really, really good, because it's nice to get my hands mucky, literally in some cases, when I go in the loft of a 300-year-old school building. And then as well, stemming on the back of the UK Innovate UK Fast Followers is the local area energy plan. They're currently in the data crunching process, but what this will do is give a 3D digital twin of Broxtowe, Gedling and Rushcliffe in terms of where the energy is being used, how it's being used, where it's being wasted, and you'll have an interactive 3D map of what we can then focus on, hopefully again through the East Midlands Combined Authority, how this can then be used to pull in as much funding as possible. Going back to our good old friend carbon sequestration, again, this has all been agreed, and the biggest problem we have at the moment is just finding somewhere. We're quietly confident with a patch that is around about 46-50 hectares. I don't want to jinx anything, but what that would do if we did get that is that it would really allow this to go into fruition. It would be within Rushcliffe, and it would be the kind of essential tool needed to get us to meet our target. As I've already said, we've got 500 trees that are being planted across the existing green land that we've got. And then going back to the proposed sequestration site, we've got good ties in with the Woodland Trust, who are happy to work with Paul in terms of best native species, options available to get as many trees in as cheaply as possible to get this land up and running, hopefully, touch wood, every pun intended, so that this can then meet our sequestration. So again, engaging in the 2050 target side of things, the retrofit scheme of 580 is now complete. We're looking at, again, 350,000 of investment on the fuel poor properties off grid. A very slow rumbling beast in the background is the Energy Company Obligation, Eco4 and Great British Insulation Scheme. Where people are most at fuel poverty, they will be referred in through the Nottingham Energy Partnership, and they will be entitled to decarbonisation measures through those schemes that are directly funded through the utility companies that have an obligation to fund those. Working not directly, but working in partnership with Metropolitan Thames Valley, who are currently finishing off a 90 whole house retrofit. That again is an East Leak area where you have the British Islands Iron and Steel Federation properties, which are a absolute heat sieve. They're all doing windows and doors and external wall insulation. We're also now looking at getting all of our irons in the fire procurement ready for the Warm Homes Local Grant Scheme. We're looking at about 1.7 million over the next 3 years. It's dropped down a bit due to oversubscription. But again, that's going to be like the old local authority delivery. So we just want to get as many homes net zero as possible through that. Again, looking at cooperative finance models for rolling out solar PV across people that might not fall within the fuel poor categories, but want an option to get to market to get the things on the roof without not necessarily having the capital needed to get it on there. So again, solar together, solar cooperatives, schools for solar, that's all things that have been looked at. Just to stress as well, the Nottingham Energy Partnership and the great continued work we do with them. So to bring the pictures into perspective, there is obviously the ongoing Green Reward Scheme. Other Ed Palmer, I'm now known as Mr. Grumpy. We'll do videos to promote that, where we'll promote best food waste, how to deal with food waste, which is obviously very fitting. What turning your lights off at night will do in terms of saving energy and that kind of thing. It's just trying to get a nice, funny TikTok-esque video to entice people onto the Green Reward Scheme. So again, I'm going to rattle off through this. We're going to continue working with Michael Gallagher, working with the combined authorities to make the most of funding schemes as they become available. Continue to explore the other options to deliver these schemes should funding get cut short. It's working with buy in bulk with our county and regional partners and fellow districts and boroughs as well. Using the most of the local area energy plan to make sure that we can demonstrate where the problems are, how we can attack it, and what's the best way to do it to give that business case ready to go. Here you go, we can spend that for you and get you the results that you need. And again, it's using obviously the existing grid and how we can make that more intelligent through battery technologies, the use of the old power station and things like that, and having those irons in the fire as well to make sure that this green infrastructure can form part of not just the decarbonisation side, but the green economy, which should be growing on the back of this as well. Getting Paul to make sure that BNG is obviously being used the best way possible within the borough. So it's making sure that when large planning applications come in, the developers don't go, oh, I'm going to invest in a bit of wood in Inverness. You know, no, we want that here, want that in Rushcliffe. So it's making sure that collaborative interdepartmental partnerships there, so that's done and that's invested, and we get the biodiversity enhancements through that. And it's utilising the green spaces by getting Alistair and his team and his experience working with Paul and associated partners to ensure that the public can get the most out of them as well. That's me done. Thank you for your time. Open to any questions.
First of all, comment saying thank you, because I am enthused. I thought I was going to be sceptical. I do have a raft of questions, and I do apologise. I'm happy to do a few and let other people speak if you like. Okay, right. HVO fuel. In the calculations that you've taken in for the carbon reduction that will entail, have you taken into account the upstream production of the fuel? That's first.
Yes and yes. HVO is not 100% carbon neutral. It's 90%. When I was pestering Crown, it comes from waste oil. So it does not come from virgin. So it doesn't come from oilseed rape's not grown and it's then turned into HVO. No. Under the greenhouse gas conversion factors, it is accepted at 90% CO2 reduction compared to mineral diesel, because there is embodied energy used in the process.
Brilliant. Okay, this one is probably a little bit contentious, and I've been asked to raise it in a way. Last July, we passed a motion to investigate solar canopies on car parks that the council is responsible for. Is that part of your scheme? Because we got a written answer back, which basically just said it's going to be sort of like spread amongst everything else. So it's trying to understand how that is going to manifest itself, and is it something that you actually think is going to be a goer to actually have solar canopies on car parks, which will help us to reduce our energy draw, and also to put in spare energy back into the grid.
Thank you. Right, so with the solar canopies, they are an option. If you imagine solar PV as a hierarchy, so what we want to do is, I'll go back to the saying, bang for our buck. So what we need to do is, with the solar canopies, you would need planning. You would need to then do full ground investigations. You'd have to be building structures to put them in, which is no problem with that. But when, for example, we've got a lot of bare roof on the building we're sat in now, which could, and I did do some basic calculations on this, do, I think, 5 times over what putting canopies on every car park that we own, about 7 or 8 of them. That is why we would be looking to invest and put solar on our roofing before the car parks. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just add to that? For all of our projects, there's a financial element. So we're looking primarily at the business case. As Ed quite rightly says, if we look at this roof, there are sections of this roof which can take more solar arrays, and that's returned. There also is a physical aspect. They're out of the way. They're less likely to get damaged because with car parking canopies, they can hit a post in terms of where they've been put up, and that, so they're far less impacted. So as we go through our estate, we will have it when we run out of all other options, and this is where the payback in the business case. It's certainly something we would always consider as a part of our future mix. But at the moment, it is not the cheapest option that's available to us because there's capacity to look at it elsewhere.
That's great. Thank you for that answer. It answers it nicely. Ed and I, we had a conversation, I think, about 2 years ago about solar on the rooftop and what you could achieve here. Right. Trees, because obviously trees and planting is part of carbon sequestration, etc. Obviously, there's a lead time because trees take a while to grow. Comes back to Paul. when you factor in carbon sequestration using trees, because there are other methods as well, obviously it's going to have a 10, 15, 20-year maturity, and the canopy has to get to a certain size before you can deem it to be significantly drawing in carbon. Where do those figures come in? Is that in like year two's sequestration, or is that kind of thing? Can you explain a bit more?
You're quite right. When you plant a tree, in actual fact, you actually expend carbon in the first year. The accounting for trees is usually done over a 100-year period, because the first few years that they're growing, for about 50 years, then they're sequestering, and then you actually get a die-off towards the end of that 100-year period. They start sequestering from about year 5, and that increases up to about year 30. As I said, then you've got about 50 years, and then you've got a dying off period.
Can I just add to that? So, it was covered in the presentation, but we were delighted that we did a proposal to Cabinet which set our offsetting strategy principles. So Ed touched on it during the course of his presentation, and it incorporates that, and that's why we're looking at it in 2024 and 2025, and not 29-30 when we are getting to trying to do that offsetting bit. It's about so that we're ready. So when we need to offset, when you get to 2030. But what was resolved was to look for between around 46 hectares of land. Cabinet resolved to look within the borough boundary, because if we are producing carbon from our own operations and it fits in with the local nature recovery strategy and the nature conservation plan, that we look for those principles, that we try and identify land where possible that is non-productive agricultural land, and that is grade 3. And we look for areas that are functional floodplain, like the River Trent corridor, and meeting those principles, because it, beyond offsetting carbon, it has biodiversity, nature conservation, rewilding, and the local nature conservation objectives, which can all be met by identifying this land, and to work with our public sector bodies, stakeholders to do that. So we have been actively since then exploring opportunities for, which Ed alluded to, for offsetting opportunities. So we're very hopeful in the near future that we'll be able to secure the land to start this work. And Paul has been working really, really hard to identify grant funds that will allow the trees to be planted on that site, and then to meet that objective. You may have seen it in the press. Harborough District Council have spent £1.8 million on 133 acres within their district for rewilding, which will form part of their offsetting strategy. So we're starting to see local authorities within the region undertake that work.
I'm okay to carry on. Yeah. I'll try and keep it. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'll come talk to you about some other ideas about that later on. You're talking about software and technology, and servers, switching servers off. Data farms and cloud-based storage obviously have a huge CO2 problem. What steps can you and are you taking to ensure that just by off-siting it, we're not making it even worse, or are we getting a genuine CO2 reduction?
That's absolutely a very fair question. And when you procure these systems, I mean, I will go back and speak to Andrew Disney, who's obviously the manager. But when you look at servers and cloud space, you can specifically procure green servers. So what you do is you find out, so you'll go out, how we're on a REGO, Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin, the same rules can apply for when you buy server space. So yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, the servers are very, very hungry. Well, certainly the data centers are. But again, in all fairness, the IT industry has always been very proactive in terms of looking at how you buy your space, how you can give it credentials in terms of what you need, what your clients need. So yeah, that's completely achievable. Yeah.
Marisa for asking that. I work for NUH Trust, and everything is Microsoft based in cloud, and Microsoft share their data centers are spread across the world.
Yeah.
I know that NUH, because it's through NHS procurement, it's UK based server sites. I don't know whether that also comes into it, whether you look at and it's always amazed me that they're not building data servers underneath tower blocks of residential and using that heat to heat the building.
Again, I mean, this is a conversation that because I do build PCs, and practically, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is an option there, and there are many studies. I put money on it. I think Nottingham is looking at heat exchanger units for servers to do just that. But no, you're absolutely right. In terms of I would suspect that within the next 10 to 15 years, the UK electricity grid will be green anyway. And that's where we'll all the country will operate on effectively a naturally green tariff. But no, going back to that, I know there are endless papers on how waste heats can be utilised to heat swimming pools and everything. So no, that's duly noted. Yeah.
One final one, very short one.
Is that the final?
No, one last one is, you mentioned air quality downgrading as a benefit, as a positive. Can you explain that to me? Because I'm a bit dense on it.
So we have air quality management zones, which were Nottingham Night Island, Radcliffe Road, and Stragglethorpe. They've been taken out of that because there's been changes with Highways England in terms of the traffic model and the sequences of the lights. So the air quality has improved. So they're not notifiable in terms of the air quality. So that is a real plus. So the downgrade means it's been removed because it's not
better.
because it's better.
Sorry.
So I've got Councillor Fletcher on my list next.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the parish council energy audits, and you say that there are grants that the parishes can go for. Would that be match funding a lot of those grants?
That's yes and no. You can go for, there are various grants you can go for, like the landfill tax, aka BIFA. You have the awards for all, and there are specific pots in the national lottery that are also based around community buildings. Don't forget that match funding can be classed as volunteer time. So if you have a resident volunteer that happens to be an architect to build whatever, that can be, you can use an hourly rate as capital funding towards it. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to rustle up £10,000. It could be that you can argue a case for that.
Yes, I was aware of that. We have got in Ruddington a building 112 years old. So we do realise it's listed, and we do try and look into what we can do with it. But you're saying that you can do quite a bit with those buildings of that age? And
absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure if I've been, because there are internal interventions you can do. There are, I mean, the first thing I'd happily do is take a look. Second thing would be speak to our conservation team about it. But just because it's listed does not stop you doing interventions to buildings. If anything, it just means you change the challenge, that's all. So no, absolutely.
I've just got one final question. Hydrogen. No engines for hydrogen. Do you think they're going to be a big thing in the future to drive your bin wagons and all that? You know, there's a lot to talk about.
I'm quite happy to jump in. There is a lot of talk about it. I think we're a few years off yet. and we've had previous discussions at the group around whether electric could work for Rushcliffe, but because of the size of the borough and battery longevity and distance we cover, it's probably not going to work for us. The electric vehicles are £500,000 compared to £220,000 for a diesel that would then convert to HVO. So yeah, I think hydrogen's the next big thing, but I think we're a few years off yet.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, thank you for a really interesting presentation. It was a good report as well, but you've really added a lot to it in terms of what you've said for the past 45 minutes. No. So what I wanted to say, well, in terms of my comment, when I tried to come in there, in terms of the air quality areas, so obviously the emissions have been greatly reduced over the years. Does that mean they won't be monitored at all now, or just how that?
It's an environmental health responsibility. So if there's various monitoring that happens, but it's an air quality management zone because it's been identified because of particulates or pollution in that area. It's just because it's got taken out because it's below that threshold for the monitoring. I believe within environmental health they'll monitor the whole borough, and if there's areas concerned, it'll just have it's got more concentrated management, and that the plan has changed in relation to that. So it doesn't mean that we don't monitor air quality as a whole. It's just that the good news is that they've been taken out because they are a cause for concern.
Sorry. There is a mention again in the report about obviously the grant support for low-income families in terms of insulating their homes and obviously, but to be fair, the grants are small and the numbers of houses that actually are made obviously better insulated are also small. And also, my ward is West Bridgeford, and obviously got huge numbers of Victorian, Edwardian houses, and they're not in low-income, obviously, families. So we still aren't, it's how we still get that message across, because that is, the emissions are huge from those homes. And I think, again, that obviously Rushcliffe as an estate has made great inroads in terms of reaching, your 2030 target. But the borough has, unless we can get those householders to pick up and run with it, we're a bit whistling in the wind a bit, really. Thank you.
No, thank you. That is an extremely relevant point, and I couldn't agree more. What's very, very interesting is we are talking to, again, in the D20 partnership, with ethical turnkey loan schemes, almost, dare I say it, going back to once upon a time, there's a thing called a Green Deal. But you're absolutely right. The vast majority of the emissions from bar transport are from housing, and not everyone has 25 to 40,000 pounds to invest in their property to bring it up to that standard. There are conversations going on about that, but what was very, very interesting is Miranda at the Nottingham Energy Partnership did a wash-up meeting about the Home Energy Advice Team, and what they actually found is when people were given their retrofit report, which basically tells you what you need to do to your house, when they were given the confidence to go ahead with it in terms of trusted traders and things like that, people were willing across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, may I say Rushcliffe in particular, but they were willing to part with their money because they knew that what was being told and put in there would work. So it's giving the people the confidence, but at the same time, it's also creating a fair finance scheme so that people can do this. Because you're absolutely right, the message has been bought, and in most cases, you preach the converted. So absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Mallinder.
Yeah, thank you. Just following up on what Councillor Plant was saying, it's very true that I think NEP have done a lot of really good work with that. you can get these Haynes manuals at home for how to do your car and things, and there's lots of ones for all kinds of different things. I've got one how to do your eco home, and one how to do your Victorian house, and they completely contradict each other all the way through. And I think that the advice that's out there that has been put out by NEP and others as well is absolutely invaluable in that, and the more people are aware of it, the better. People know about insulation, but then they're worried about blocking up the air gaps in Victorian houses, and then they get mould, and it needs to be done properly. So it is worth that. There's a big education thing to be done there. I think there's still also a big education thing to be done with the people of Rushcliffe as a whole. As what we're doing is absolutely brilliant, but there are still a lot of people out there who think, oh, the borough are fixing all the council, all the climate change problems. I don't have to do anything, and they sort of don't get the message that it's what the borough council is doing is the borough council's estate and sort of category 1, 2, and 3. But they still have to do stuff as well themselves. They have to make the changes as well. And I do think that message does need to be sort of pushed harder, not necessarily just by the borough council, but within society as a whole. That's the thing that you find in a lot of areas, not just in Rushcliffe. I think the stuff that's being done is very, very good as well. And a lot of the stuff that the council buildings came up with earlier was things I was going to mention as well. Transition to HVO, I assume that's going to be, because that's effectively a like-for-like drop in fuel. That means you're going to be running internal combustion engine kit for, I guess, 20 years, something like that-ish, on that fleet, depending on how long you run it. By which time there will be other alternatives to come along to. Coming back to the point you make about hydrogen as well, it may not necessarily be that the hydrogen that's created, if it's a green hydrogen system, it may not be that you actually have that on the vehicles. So what you could do is you could pump the hydrogen through the natural gas network or an existing network and burn it in place to create electricity to power up electric vehicles. And 15 to 20 years time down the line, you're likely to be using alternative chemical makeup of the batteries. They'll still be electric, but that will give you the electric vehicles with much greater range. So by that point, you're probably going from HVO to electric wagons on the fleet for the waste collection, which would be have the range that would be needed, possibly by having the hydrogen power generation, but not actually on the vehicles themselves. So there's work to be done around that, clearly. I was interested to see all the bit about the waste collection as well. I mean, that's fantastic. We're going to get the improvements to the waste collection and the food collection as well. I do think on the different size bins, I think maybe some kind of size guide in one of the things that goes out, because people haven't quite grasped the difference between what's there. They know there's a 180 litre bin coming, but they don't know what their existing residual waste and recycling bin size are. I think some people think, is this one a 180? Is it a 250? I don't know. So if people have got something to compare like for like, little sort of size scale, that would be great. If we could, even with some of them, one of the things one could do is try and drive that behaviour as well. So if we had smaller residual waste bins, so people didn't feel the need to fill them up all the time, that would be great. I know that was our idea that was put forward by Councillor Blount, as she was then, on a waste visit, I think back in about 2005 as a councillor. That's Sue, for those of you who don't know. Yeah, lots of excellent work in there, absolutely fantastic. And let's keep working on it. Thank you.
Just a point on the fleet vehicles and the HVO. Our strategy is informed. We commissioned a transport report by a company called Cenex, which looked at our vehicle replacement journey and our journey to net carbon neutral. So what we are doing is we've plugged in that Cenex report into our vehicle replacement program. That's why we've transitioned to HVO. A lot of the points you make are really, really valid, but the industry is just not there yet. So in terms of our electric vehicles, and that is following a tiered approach with our vehicle replacement program that brings us to 2030 and then plugs into Ed's figures so that we get that. So we're not saying that this will be, it's really transitional. So we're not there yet. It's when it's ready, as Darrell says about electric vehicles not been there yet or hydrogen not been there yet. So
Just on that, yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the HVO is great, but that's not where it stops at the point. Those vehicles are still internal combustion engine vehicles. Once you get past 2040, internal combustion engine vehicles will not be available. So at that point, they'll have to be kind of a transition over time to something else.
And the report is absolutely a recognition of that. But at least we've got a clear direction of travel now.
And also, Councillor, just to confirm, if you do get asked, the 180 bins are the same height as the 240 bin. So 240 is the number you're looking for. 240 litres is your standard size bin. So it's the same height because it needs to go onto the bin lift, but it's just a thinner, narrower bin.
Thank you. Just going on with the fleets and that, and seeing we've got the 2 electric vehicles and that are being used by refuse teams and that you say, is there anything of kind of vehicles for officers who just have to go and visit areas around the borough like planning, environmental health, that type of thing as well?
Yeah, so obviously we're on a transition and a journey. One of the vehicles is the facilities, so the community facilities van, which is used for West Bridgeford. I love it because it's a moving advertisement of, because we talk about, conveying this message to the general public and the Borough Council's commitments. So it's got the Rushcliffe liveried, it's carbon clever branding, and that we are, as a part of, Ed mentioned our staff travel and indirect emissions. There's always an option to add fleet vehicles. So instead of, say, an officer is driving a diesel or petrol vehicle and they were able to book out a pool car, which is fully electric, small engine, that's something that is a project that we can look at. It's just we're not quite there yet in terms of, we are going through this priority list of actions in terms of our fleet and waste vehicles, but that is certainly an option. How that will look like in LGR, I'm not sure, but it's certainly something that we can look at.
And I just got where it's been touched about getting that message out there for home, like from Council Plan, kind of said about the nature of some people's housing and getting that. Is there kind of the scope of trying to get, is it Nottinghamshire Energy Partnership and such people like that to some of the events that the borough do, and also like the markets that regularly take place, like in Bingham and Ruddington and all that, to see if they could kind of have a stall there and then promote that they're going to be there, potentially for people to go and then speak to them as well, because if they probably know, they might make a special kind of.
No, that's a fairly good point. Absolutely. I mean, one thing is, I say, we are having a fast followers event in the British Geological Survey, which will be open to absolutely everyone. It will be an Eventbrite. But yeah, in terms of working with, now I do know the Nottingham Energy Partnership are split across their D2N2 and obviously Nottinghamshire. But the issue is the resource for them to do that. Now, absolutely. I mean, this almost goes back to the day of the Energy Saving Trust Advice Centres, when they did have a team that would proactively go out with a one of those pull-up gazebos and set up shop. And yeah, definitely up for that, because you can talk about fuel switching, you can talk about quick wins, you can talk about, again, go down the journey of a deep retrofit if that's what you want to do, and then refer on to the appropriate agencies. But I think it's just the resource, but I'm more than happy to see what resource they've got, and if we can go to particularly places like Bingham, go down to West Bridgeford and look into doing that. I'll certainly take that on board, yeah.
And just like with the tree planting scheme, and also where money is being used from UK SPF to support kind of schemes and that. For instance, in the Butfield Sports Club had some solar panels put on there. Is there anywhere of that kind of influence and scope kind of put in? Because it's not, he described as scope 3 was how like external contractors like with Exchange Parkwood, does that kind of get captured anywhere going to 2050, and kind of is there more of that kind of getting looked at?
all of what you just said, when working with schools or households or anything like that, that gets captured in the annual greenhouse gas figures that come back from DEFRA. Now, to make things, because everything's always never straightforward, every year in next couple of months, DEFRA will release the figures that are always 2 years behind. So that, remember the kind of graph that was showing all the agricultural, industrial, blah, blah, blah across Rushcliffe, that data is always 2 years old. But what you're on about will be captured in the in that data, so that will be measured within the 2050 targets. Yeah.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question about the glass collection bins. If you don't produce much glass, can you opt out of having one of those bins, and then maybe at a later date, if you do start producing a lot of glass, opt back in?
So it's been agreed that the scheme will be opt out, but we will be actively encouraging residents to take part, because if you've got room to put the bin, you don't have to put it out every 6 weeks. You can quite happily store the glass. So yes, it is going to be opt out, but I think with the proviso that we really, I've been here a long time. A lot of people have been asking for curbside glass for many years, so we're quite keen to roll it out now. So hopefully there'll be a really good take up. There generally is a really, really good take up. That opt out scheme will potentially help us think about what recycling sites we need to keep in place, because clearly, if most people are recycling glass at home, a lot of the recycling sites will become redundant, and it's pointless with what we're talking about tonight, running refuse trucks to certain villages backwards and forwards when there's literally no glass in the recycling sites anymore. So yeah, but the simple answer is yes, you will be able to opt out.
Okay, and then my next question was really for Ed. We've been talking about putting solar panels on the top here for many, many years. I know we did a survey to make sure the roof could take it. How far are we off from getting those panels up there and working? And also, are we convinced that the arena is working efficiently? I'm just thinking the aircon's been on all night, hasn't cut in here. Is it also on in the other rooms? Is it on upstairs when nobody's there? Do we have a really good system that monitors, if rooms need to be switched off? And I know when we go in the members' room sometimes, the aircon's on, there's nobody in there. And then following on from that, you mentioned the EV charging points at the back of the arena. Well, they've been there probably about 5 years now. So that was new technology 5 years ago, old technology now. Are they getting used, and should we be sort of upgrading them so the super fast chargers to encourage people to use them? Thanks.
No, thank you for the question. There will always be the frustration of what's called user interface, where yes, sadly the aircon will be left on every now and again, although ideally it should be turned off. I mean, I'm guilty. I switched this on. Yeah. I'll have it. I always do. I must admit, I always do go in and turn the meeting rooms off and then scowl at people. That's one perk of the job. But I also, I turn this on, and I will be turning it off when this meeting's done. So absolutely, I'll take that on the chin. Do you want me to turn it off? No. I'll do that when I've answered the question. So to the second part is it's all to do with funding. So we're waiting for the most appropriate form of funding. So do we look at seeing where Salix is going to go? Do we look at ethical investment? Or do we look at it's difficult to absolutely make a decision in terms of what's going to be going on for the local authority in the next 3 to 5 years anyway. However, if a decision is made, an install could probably be turned around reasonably quickly. In terms of the EV points, they are used. They are a trickle charger point. We have had a request, and we actually have published guides that can be handed out to people that are new in the area on how to use them. So that actually sits with reception. So yes, they are used. At this moment in time, I don't think it warrants putting in a rapid charge point at the arena, but where we do have the rapid charge points, so at the Country Park and at Gamston, I can say with confidence it's used by a whole variety of users, including DPD, ICE or Cadent, using their electric fleet there. So yes, and I think when it's at end of life, and I'll consult with BP Pulse on that, then we'll look at whether they want to invest and upgrade it.
Can I just add a couple of points? So for this centre, we use Stark smart energy monitoring. All the buildings on PIRs, so the lights go off and the system's not used. And with the exception of this room, because we've overridden the system in terms of turning on the air, because it was particularly warm when we joined. Brilliant. So yes, and in terms of just to add to that, we are actively exploring grants and opportunities, but we do have a finite amount of resources, and there is an element of prioritisation of projects. You will see within Appendix 2, we have been working on Cochrane Leisure Centre, which is a big, dirty old carbon building. We're putting in an air source heat pump, but we've put we got £250,000 grant from Sport England for a significant solar array on that roof. So we have to, whilst we work through our buildings, we have to prioritise our estate as well and the project managers that we've got. So there's an element of finding the right grant and then bringing in the resource at the right time to be able to deliver these in as efficient manner as possible. The next priority schemes for delivery are Mr. Julian Kahn Pavilion at West Park, which is a full all-encompassing decarbonisation project, and Gamston Community Hall as well are our two next priority projects to deliver over the next 6 to 9 months.
Is there any other further questions or comments from councillors? No. No, you said Joe, the way you're looking. Councillor Billings. I was just right, so I'll move on to the recommendations. Just to is that consider the progress to date of the adaptive carbon management action plan, and B, contribute towards the emerging carbon management actions for 2025-26. So I think we've all done that. So if we can just have a show of hands, of course we have to, just on those to meet that. So thank you very much, and thank you very much everybody for your presentations and answers to the questions from councillors. So yeah, it's really good to have these kind of two very closely linked topics on tonight. So I think it helped focus our minds onto this agenda. So going on to the final item of our meeting on the agenda tonight is the work programme. And as you will see, councillors, that it is a bit sparse on the work programme. The next one in July, which date's got to be set, we've got from Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing to scrutinise. That's gone through the scrutiny requests. But then October and January and April 2026, there isn't anything at the moment. So I would encourage councillors to submit requests, speak to officers as well on those kind of requests, and to work with them on seeing to get something through and onto the programme, because we have got capacity, which is kind of rare. I remember when this had 2 or 3 items nearly every meeting, and now we're down to just the one on that. So if we've got any comments on that, I'll just move to accept that work programme from everybody. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's great, thank you very much. I haven't got anything else on the agenda for tonight, and close the meeting at 21:06. Thank you very much.